це нормально,
Да.
да? Тому що ми картинку розширюємо.
Яринко.
Ні, вона прийде, коли треба. Ми починаємо просто. Ірин, потім в кадр буде недобре заходити. Давай сюди, краще тут присядеш. Окей, го.
Welcome everybody who joined us to discussion panel. Today we will talk about the saving heritages during the war, how to do this, what instrument we have for today, and how to survive in this cultural sphere and to protect our main heritages. So Lena will be a conductor, and we have experts. Lena, maybe you, yeah.
Yes, so here at our festival we tried to gather a very diverse jury, and our choice was very conscious. They all coming from different fields of studies and different interests and expertises, but I think all in all it makes a very good mixture. So here with us we have representatives of the short and feature competition juries. Next to me is Sebastian Majsterowicz, who is a digital historian. I don't know if I should go on with all the other titles, because recently we learned that you became a digital nomad, so maybe you can also tell a little bit more about that. But the main reason why Sebastian is here at our festival is because we met each other when I was doing an interview for one of the websites that I'm working for about the initiative called SUCHO, which is the acronym for Saving Ukrainian Cultural Heritage Online. This is an amazing initiative that collaborated with so many institutions in Ukraine, and if I'm not mistaken, you were also collaborating with the Shevchenko National University recently. And here we have another speaker, which is who is Olena Ivanovska. She is the folklorist, and she is a professor of the Kyiv National University, Shevchenko University, and she will share with us her experience. She lives in Ukraine, she stayed in Ukraine, and she traveled specifically for our festival to Poland. She experienced all the hardship of the journey, and as you may probably know, at one of the recent attacks on Kyiv, the university actually also suffered, and here enters a collaboration also between Sucha and university. So we will cover it a little bit as well. We will also briefly talk to our director, Tatiana Staneva, who is not only director of the festival, but a cultural diplomat indeed for Ukraine. So she is engaged as an activist and as a speaker in many different initiatives, not only in Ukraine, but in Europe, specifically in Bulgaria, but in other countries, I believe, as well. So Tanya will share her experience about organizing festival in times of war and about cultural diplomacy in general. So I propose to start with interrogating Sebastian about how come that you related to Ukraine? So when have you been interested, or how much did you know about the country before the war started? Apart, of course, from like the general knowledge. So were you collaborating with someone? You know, have you had any specific project, or did you become related to it after the outbreak of war?
Yeah. Oops. Yeah. Well,
No, you have to.
Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see.
Thank you, first of all, for inviting me here. It's an incredible honor to be at this festival, and ethnographic documentaries have been my lifelong passion. I also studied film at some point, and now I do many things, but just cannot express how grateful I am to be here. No, I didn't have any personal connection to Ukraine whatsoever. I did study East European Studies, Area Studies at University College London for my master's, but that's mainly because I have a bit of a background from ex-Yugoslavia, and I was trying to spend some time in the region, and it was an interdisciplinary program. So as part of my studies as a historian and generally at university, I have been exposed to Ukraine as well and a bit of its history, and then I got interested. But I have never been to Ukraine. I barely know anyone from Ukraine before the war, obviously now that it's changed. And it really all started on February 26th. For me, I've been following the outbreak, like the first bombardments on Kiev live on CNN at night. And couldn't get off Twitter, so everything where I followed it was on Twitter. A random music librarian from the US, who I followed on Twitter, Anakias, 2 days after the invasion, she tweeted, "Hey, I'm a music librarian, we're having a conference soon, a music ethnologist actually, and can we think about how we can safeguard digitized music collections in Ukraine?" And I reacted to that, and this is my first exposure basically to being involved with Ukraine. So this is when Sucho was born.
I'm not an expert in digital history in general, but here at Toko we never ashamed of recognizing our own ignorance because we want to learn about the world. So can you tell me, are there any specific directions in digital history in general? So for example, specifically preservance of heritage in times of war, are there any specific tools, or do you have any actual specification in your activities?
So I'm not trained in cultural preservation. I'm not an archivist or a librarian, right? I used to be a software developer. This is why I call myself digital. And during the pandemic, I started using a lot of digitized archives. So I think for the last 20 years or so, museums, libraries, and archives all around the world have been digitizing en masse. These materials are online, and I have been using them as a researcher. But the science of preserving these materials digitally is its own field. So I have learned an amazing amount now. But all I can say is that just scanning it and uploading it is not enough. It is very fragile. The servers that these digitized materials are stored on, they are physical items, right? So they can be destroyed by bombs. They can be victims of cyber attacks. They can be, the internet can be cut off, and the people who take care of it are at risk of maybe not taking care of them anymore. So I think the most important lesson I've learned so far is that although something is digital, it doesn't mean it's safe. And that's where Sucho and our 1,500 volunteers basically came in.
So I remember from our previous talks that we discussed tools that you used while creating the whole platform, and most of them I actually, everyone had access to them, everyone used them in the daily life, but the thing is to efficiently combine them and to organize the process in a way that it actually helps very quickly and very efficiently to preserve what has to be preserved and what can be lost in no time. So can you please tell more which exactly tools you work with?
Sure. The most available tool is the Wayback Machine of the Internet Archive. So basically, I have to backtrack a little bit. What we've been doing since February 26th and how the initiative started is we were looking for every digitized collection of Ukrainian cultural heritage online and try to download it. This is what we've been doing, right? To save it in case a server gets offline. And so there's an institution in the US that's called the Internet Archive that tries to preserve as much materials of the internet as possible. And they have a software that's called the Wayback Machine, which is like a time machine for the internet. So it continuously looks through the internet and makes a snapshot of websites at a certain point of time if people have submitted something to it. People need to actively, suggest a website that this machine can take care of. So that's one thing that anybody can do. You can go on this website and say, hey, I care about this website, please save it. And then there are other tools that we have been using. Sometimes it's a bit tricky. It's a technical process to save websites when they contain a lot of materials like PDFs or images or movies, and these are the things that we care about, right? So sometimes it doesn't work so well, and there's an open source software called Web Recorder that we use for that. And these are the tools that we use to preserve, but then what we learned as well is that it's as important to have the tools to organize each other. So to actually, in a grassroots way, let us collaborate. And mostly we know these tools from, working through the pandemic, but it's very hard to apply them, like Slack or also Google Sheets. But it's a different thing to apply them for volunteers. And that's what we've been doing, and there's a kind of process now that I think we've been developing that can help other grassroots initiatives to, organize whatever their cause is. It doesn't have to be our cause, but to online organize collaborators, to 1,500 people to work together efficiently. That's basically something that we learned on the fly as well.
I also know that there were some quite dramatic moments, and you managed to save Kharkiv National Archive, the last moment practically. So can you tell a little bit more about it? And maybe there are other cases that we haven't discussed before that you can share. Yes,
that changes as well, like day, right? So the horrible attacks yesterday have, for example, meant that Lviv hasn't only lost electricity, and this was supposed to be a safer area, but it's also the internet connectivity was reduced to 25% in the Lviv Oblast yesterday. So it's a really changing landscape all the time. But yeah, with the State Archive of Kharkiv, how we worked together as volunteers trying to save the websites was that we would put everything in a big Google Sheet, and then people would claim a website. So they would say, hey, I will try to archive this historical society or this archaeological excavation site. And then you would personally try to take care of it. So I picked the website of the State Archive of Kharkiv. I saw that there's a lot of very important files on there. Files documenting the Holodomor, census data, but also files documenting Stalinist purges in the 30s. So it literally had the stories, the case files of people who were shot or sent to the Gulag. So extremely invaluable historical data, right? And it was around 100 gigabytes of data uploaded to this website. And I finished the download on the 3rd of March in the morning, and then by 5 p.m. the website was offline. So it was, I think, a couple of hours that were in between when the download was finished and the website was offline. And then we learned that the State Archive of Kharkiv was shelled. We saw video from it, and actually we learned recently that an entire building of the State Archive has been destroyed. So for months, this website was offline, but I'm very happy to announce that it is actually back online. It wasn't online for 8 months or so, and this is the ideal scenario for us, right? We're making backups, but we hope that every single website with the materials will go back online, and that we can delete all backups. This is not data that belongs to us, But yeah, unfortunately, you have many, many other examples where that hasn't happened. For example, the regional library of Kherson has been online, is not online yet. Let's see what happens. I hope, I believe in it. But we don't know why it went offline as well, because when you go to the original website, it says account suspended. So does that mean that a Russian occupant switched it off? Does it mean that someone couldn't pay the bills anymore? Does it mean that the person who took care of the server had to go to the front? We don't know. We do have a copy just in case, but there are many of these kind of dramatic kind of events, if you can call them that, in the digital sphere.
I also wanted to touch upon the collaboration with the people on spot in Ukraine, because I know that you had volunteers from all over the world who actively engaged in these processes of saving, backuping, and doing all kind of organizational, administrative job as well, technical, of course. But speaking of Ukraine, I think it's one of the problems that we have in our country, and we discussed it briefly the other day, that quite a lot of people, especially in regions outside of big cities, they don't speak English. And it's a huge problem because there's a lot of countries, initiatives, a lot of volunteers, or a lot of very experienced people, institutions that are ready to help, but we are not always ready to receive this help. Can you tell about your experience, how you managed to deal with this problem? Have you encountered this problem, and like what was the ways of solving it, and like is it improving over time?
Yeah, that's certainly a challenge for us, because the web archiving was the first phase of Sucho, but then as we started talking to Ukrainians, we were wondering, well, how else can we help, of course, right? The web archiving was good for us because we could do something without the need of active participation of Ukrainians, especially in the first months of the war, where we didn't want to bother people by, asking them to upload their data directly or something. We could just go and do something that we thought might be important. But what was very clear then for phase 2 is that we got the feedback, okay, what else is needed? We need hardware to digitize, the things that are not digitized. The vast majority of materials are not digitized. But we also need training in the methods and raising awareness for Ukrainian culture online. And so we were quite successful actually in raising funds for equipment. We've raised over 200,000 euros to buy hardware, scanners, computers, IT equipment, hard drives, everything that's needed on the ground. But the bottleneck has been the contact to people in Ukraine, finding a Ukrainian who can take charge of this initiative, in the sense that they know the state of the art of digitization methods, worldwide. And they have the contacts to the institution who do not have that expertise maybe yet. But luckily, you should never underestimate the amazing institutions that do exist in Ukraine. So we are now talking to the Center for Urban History in Lviv, who have the biggest audio-visual collection in Ukraine as well. They have digitized 7,000 amateur films from the Soviet times, from ordinary people making Super 8 films. And I think they are the leading audiovisual collection in Europe, to be honest, of amateur films. And because they are so avant-garde, we have approached them and asked, hey, can you maybe take over the harder, job of connecting people? Because, you know also how it is to work as a cultural worker in Ukraine. And we try to be as sensible as possible, to not impose or patronize in having the expectations of peacetime digitization methods. But I think it really depends on finding the right partners, and this is what we're trying a lot now. And I think we're getting somewhere.
I want to focus on something that you mentioned and what I think can be very interesting for many of Ukrainians, including smaller initiatives. So you were successful in raising funds. Can you tell a little bit more about that? And also, can you maybe give some advices? Where would you recommend to look especially for smaller institutions, museums, libraries, like regional institutions that might be looking for support. And like, what are the strategies? What are the right way, to present their needs?
I mean, I'm completely new to this world as well. This is something that came out of our amazing volunteer community. So there were people that have experience in professional fundraising. And there was also just a lot of people that had connections to the tech industry, for example, because they work in that. And it was really people power in the sense that we got connected to, for example, to Amazon Web Services Poland. It's always Polish people that really take up the baton through a volunteer, and they just said, yes, let's go. We will pay for servers, and we will also see if we can donate equipment. So that was connections that volunteers had, and they were willing to use these connections. But on the crowdfunding, we use a platform called Open Collective, which you interviewed before, actually. And that is an amazing platform because what it allows you to do is it allows a number of strangers, let's say you are 3 friends, right? And you want to do something together and you have a great project that needs some funds and people might want to donate, but you don't have a bank account together, right? So how do you manage your funds? And this platform allows you to come up with an idea and to look for a host, non-profit, that actually takes care of all the complicated things, and then you can instantly send people a link and donate. So that has worked because of the generosity of people to pay for a service, for example, and also many people have donated for the equipment. And I would recommend that platform to anyone because it's got an activist spirit.
I just wanted to support it, because for me, it was one of the first freelancing jobs that I found after the start of war, and it was not only a way to raise some extra money, which of course was very important, but like exactly the spirit that they got there, and like the amazing people that you meet all over the world. And you just look at the project that they're doing, they are starting with practically nothing, with just a bare idea and a lot of enthusiasm, and suddenly they're big, they're huge, they're influential, and they inspire other people, they collaborate with each other, and thanks to Open Collective, Sebastian is here with us right now, so please do check this one, of course.
Yeah, and I don't want to go on too long, but basically what I think maybe I have learned is from another initiative which is super important, the Museum Crisis Center in Ukraine, because we are trying to take care of equipment, but the salaries of Ukrainian cultural workers have been cut to 30% of what was already not a lot of money.
This is our painful.
Yeah, and the Museum Crisis Center tries to pay people that are taking care of this invaluable heritage. And how they have been doing their fundraising campaign has really impressed me because they attach stories to who people will support when they give money. So they have profiles of every institution, of the people that they are trying to support. And I think that is maybe the biggest lesson that we have learned as well, is to make it very, very easy for people to donate. It needs to be one click. A bank account number doesn't do anything. Nobody will send money using a bank account because it's very difficult to send. People are not used to this anymore, and sending it internationally is a different, challenge. And then, so a one-click donation, that's really important. It's something the Open Collective does. And then knowing what the money will do, very, very concretely, what the outcome of, even if somebody just gives 10 euros, and where does it go, and how will it be used? If you message that clearly, I think there's a lot of goodwill worldwide of people to help.
Speaking of communication and this, not only language problem, but like in general, the consolidation of different institutions and their communication within the country, we also briefly touched upon the fact that plenty of institutions on the central Ukraine, on the western Ukraine, they received a lot of help by those being closer to military actions, unfortunately, because they lack of internet, they lack of communications, and also they are not that, they're more far away from West, and that's why they're less aware of the processes that's going. How would you evaluate, is it changing over time? Have you managed to reach with your initiative some institutions on the East? I mean, obviously you acted there, but would you say that this number is increasing somehow and any like positive processes happening there? Or what would you think should be done, you know, to improve the situation at the moment? And I care specifically because I'm coming from Donbass, and after meeting Sebastian online, and I started thinking of all the small museums, very unique ones that preserve the culture of Donbass, which was not very well promoted even within Ukraine, and like maybe indeed eastern part of the country is not that good at, let's put it like selling itself, they're not that good with marketing tools, but anyway there are a lot of enthusiasts out there, also ethnographers, folklorists who put a lot of, you know, efforts in collecting items, in saving folklore. Unfortunately, it's all physical. They very often don't even have like the basic website, so unless you just ride by car and like, okay, it's a flag there saying that it's some kind of like village, whatever, museum, and you like go there and it's wow, some unique collection. So what is your idea? So are there any experiences or contacts that you have that might help to preserve these small institutions, not only in Donbass, but in the other regions of Ukraine?
I mean, yes, I think I have ideas, but this is very, very overwhelming in a sense, because as you asked me earlier, I don't have any pre-existing connections, right? So, but we just felt this was something that we heard time and again, that, you know, Lviv and Kiev, you know, this is where the attention goes. And so, again, we are looking for the right people to change that. So there is an initiative from the German Museum Karlshorst in Berlin, who has been doing amazing work in thinking about these small institutions, and, for example, sending things to Kharkiv as well, but also thinking about smaller institutions. And basically, because I'm not an expert, my co-founders are Slavic studies experts, but they're also not necessarily experts in the landscape, institutional landscape of Ukraine, as you said. I think trusting the right people who you recognize care about these institutions is really important. So these people, I just saw that they do extremely good work, and now we're trying to get power banks, big power banks that actually can run a whole computer or a digitalization scanner exactly to these locations, because, you know, you can't even rely on electricity right now. And then these personal connections bit by bit accumulate. So we are also working together with the Cherkasy Library now, which is not so far east, but it's a small institution, and they have been doing amazing work for their community. So they have been holding a competition for traumatized children to draw drawings, and they're digitizing these drawings, and they're working together with the Ethnological Museum next door, because the Ethnological Museum has textiles, and they think they can use the book scanner that we're trying to get them now to also scan these textiles. So I feel like once you find the right people, and people take personal responsibility of really making sure, even if it's hard to get it to a small institution, then there are cascading effects as well. Then other institutions are reached that you would have never known the existence about. Maybe one last thing is this exact situation that you described, that, you know, you drive through the town and this is the only way that you know something exists. Like, our volunteers have been doing this online. I was completely amazed by that. They walked the streets or the maps of Ukraine bit by bit, looking for signs, say museum or ethno-village or something like that. And these were complete strangers worldwide, and they used data from Wikipedia to discover small institutions. So we realized that we as Sucho, actually, because of our web downloading, have probably one of the most extensive databases of institutions at all in Ukraine. And we are just trying to make that data more available, but we need to be careful as well that you make it available to the good people, right? And you don't make things targets. So all of these things, it's a huge process that I think from different sides, but the attitude counts. If you think that small institutions in the East are worth the attention, then give it to them and focus on them, even though the work is hard.
you mentioned that you're not a specific expert on preserving the heritage in times of war, but maybe you have some examples, especially from ex-Yugoslavia, of preserving the heritage, not necessarily digitally, but like any other worthy examples, and anything that Ukraine can learn from, because I believe in our situation we have a lot of similarities.
Yes. Personally, what has influenced me in this kind of maybe urgency that this is important and they need to support people who take care of heritage that's in danger is that my dad is in Bosnia, and I think a really pivotal moment for me has been that in '92, when the siege of Sarajevo just started, the National Library in Sarajevo was burnt to the ground by shelling. And librarians and ordinary citizens of Sarajevo ran into the National Library and carried out, like, the most valuable manuscripts under sniper fire, and librarians and ordinary people died doing this. And that gives you some perspective of how important it is. And you need to celebrate the people that take an active stance. So you can do that in many more ways these days. So you can also do it remotely from your home, right? And this is a luxury, and I wish that would have been possible in the 90s. It wasn't. But I always come back to the same kind of principle, which is people taking care of each other and taking personal responsibility for items that they feel a connection to and they think need to be preserved. That I think the personal aspect of selecting heritage that you think needs to be preserved at all costs, that is maybe the key to doing this in war, wherever it is.
We have a little bit of pressure of time, so here comes my last question to you for this conversation. So I know that since our previous talk in May, back then Sucho was like at the stage 1. Now here comes the stage 2, where you more work with educating and like delivering the physical hardware on spots. Do you think there will be stage 3? And if yes, what it will be? So at the moment, like, what are the main things that you're working for? How you see the development of this initiative? Or maybe what are the most dire needs right now? Because, we're hosted by a huge international film festival in Erika Image, and who knows who will watch this, and who knows who might be interested in joining and helping us. So maybe you can tell a little bit more about needs and like the trajectory of evolution of the project.
Well, ideally, I would like stage 3 of Sucho be that we don't exist anymore. Yeah, that is still our goal. But I think something that we've been thinking about obviously is restitution. So we have digital backups, right? And in the case that these are needed, because, hopefully not, but if physical collections are destroyed and digital collections are destroyed, or just the digital collection is destroyed, how do you give it back? This is a technical challenge. We have some tools that might make it possible, but that's definitely something that we're thinking about, because that seems that will unfortunately be necessary. In the other kind of aspects, I would really like to defer always to Ukrainians, so we're reacting to what comes out of Ukraine in requests for the future. So we're working, for example, together with the Ukrainian Library Association and UNESCO and the International Federation of Libraries and Archives to build a national digital library of Ukraine. It's not us that can do that, but we can definitely give technical advice. So this is what we're trying to do. And then, for example, with the Cherkasy library that I've just mentioned, the corporation, the IT person there has offered to make video tutorials of how they are digitizing right now. And then we have volunteers that can translate that into Ukrainian, or they can make English subtitles for other institutions that need to urgently, have training materials. We are reacting. I think for the future, we would like to react to the impulses that come out of Ukraine, and if they think that we can still be useful, we will will try to help, but we want to make ourselves obsolete. That is the main goal.
Thank you, Sebastian, for your work, for your enthusiasm, for your engagement in our case. And if anyone watching us have any additional questions, you're of course welcome to ask them either now online or contact us later. And if you know how to help, how to engage, if you're a representative of any institutions that need help or can provide help for other institutions, please do contact us. We are very responsive, we are very open to collaboration. And I believe we can always connect you with Sebastian, and maybe something new and beautiful will be born out of it. With this, I want to move to our next speaker, Olena Ivanovska, who is, again, I will remind you, is a folklorist and a professor of Taras Shevchenko Kyiv National University. She's a jury member and dear friend of OCO since the very first edition, so we trust her expertise so much. And we are very glad to have her and her daughter here with us. And we will have also Yarina, our translator, who will help us today with the Ukrainian English translation. As I mentioned before, Olena came from Kyiv, and she used to be in Kyiv where the recent attack happened. Attack that also affected her workplace and one of the main educational institutions in Ukraine. So I wanted to start with a question about personal experience, like where were you that day, that moment where the attack happened? How did you learn about it, and like how the events developed that day?
Добрий вечір всім. Звісно, що атака на твій рідний університет – це не може бути сприйнято ніяк спокійно, і ми не одинокі, наш університет, адже близько 2000 освітніх закладів пережили атаки терористичні нашої сусідки Росії. Через те, звісно, це лють в першу чергу, це нерозуміння, як в 21 столітті цивілізовані люди можуть так брутально, по-дикунськи поводитися і з культурними, і освітніми закладами.
Good evening, everyone. We are from Ukraine and we are from Kyiv. We cannot be calm when our alma mater, our native university, is attacked by Russian. So it was really very hard and difficult to hear about it, but we are not alone in this situation. Nearly 2,000 of institutions in whole Ukraine have been attacked by our neighbor, by Russia.
Через те, звісно, що це тільки мобілізує, це тільки організовує, і після прибирання великого біля нашого прекрасного жовтого корпусу ми всі тільки сповнені такої, не знаю, відчуття, що треба докладати всіх зусиль, кожен на своєму місці, хто на фронті в обороні зі зброєю в руках, хто в освітніх закладах, працюючи зі студентами, не знаю, забезпечуючи якимись науковими розвідками освітні заклади, хто на культурному фронті, але кожен має займатися своєю справою дуже відповідально і наполегливо.
On the other side, such situations join us. They bring us together. So in our institution, which is known as Yellow Building, Zhotый Corpus, we have Etnoloka, and we gathered together in order to clean our audiences, in order to help our institution by ourselves. Everyone must do his work on his front. Our students, our graduates, work is to work on the cultural front. Yes, as the motto of this festival, your culture is your weapon.
I think that it isn't it true that this situation unites